I want to preface this by saying that I really like Zenyatta. He's got a really cool character theme and design, and it's a lot of fun to play what's sort of like a ranged sniper with the ability to heal your teammates. And frankly, whenever I do play him, I tend to rack up a lot of kills. With that said, he needs a change, plain and simple. Everyone assumed that with the recent Widowmaker body shot nerf that Zenyatta would get a lot stronger. Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the case. How's it going, everybody? Force here, and today we're going to talk about the fact that Zenyatta might quite possibly be one of the worst heroes in Overwatch at the moment. I know what you're saying. Well, Force, I play Zenyatta and I do really well. Maybe you should get good. Maybe you should learn to play. You're not doing it right. All right, listen. It may not be the best barometer for the general player base, but it does say something about his viability when he is the only hero to never be picked in a recent tournament. That's right. In the Alienware monthly tournament that just took place, Zenyatta was the only hero to never be played by any team. Out of roughly 900 opportunities, not once did any professional player say, "Oh, Zenyatta would be a great choice here." Why is that? It's because he's got some issues. It's because in the current metagame, he's just a bit too weak. Now, the interesting thing is that he used to be picked very often by professional teams, with some teams running 2 Zenyatas. Now, what's the difference between that point in time and today? The function of his Orbs of Harmony and Discord. So way back in the beta, the Orb of Harmony and Orb of Discord used to actually stay on your target until they either died or until you picked a new target. However, back in March before the game launched, they changed it to return once your target broke line of sight for more than 3 seconds. So that's the current iteration of how his orbs work at the moment. This was a huge nerf. Discord was a great way to track down enemies like flankers, giving Zenyatta more awareness of where people were, and the Orb of Harmony was a great way to enhance your flankers, like your Tracer and your Genji, essentially making their backline harass much more effective. The problem was that the Blizzard didn't really like the way that this played. It basically made Zenyatta kind of set it and forget it for his 2 major abilities, and Blizzard didn't like it. In fact, when they made this change, they acknowledged in the blog post with these patch notes that it was a big deal, saying, "We realize this is a pretty major change, but it's one that we'd like to test and see how it plays out." Well, 4 months later, how it's played out is that he is probably one of the worst heroes in the current meta. He is the least picked by far. As I mentioned, competitive teams aren't running him, and I know that how heroes are played on a competitive level by the pros is different from how they're played in the general populace, but I also know from my own experience, I am rarely seeing Zenyatta, and there's a lot of the general player base who will follow along with the basic meta that the professional players are doing. And we can't just say that people are playing him wrong, because if anyone knows how to play any of the heroes right, it's the people who are doing this professionally and winning tournaments and getting money to do so. They're the ones who can figure out if and how heroes are going to work, and right now, Zenyatta's just not working. And don't take my word for it, Jeff Kaplan himself recently said about Zenyatta, "We've been talking about him. We wanted to see how the Widowmaker and McCree balance changes played out before making any changes. We're exploring some options right now." He's basically saying that Blizzard is aware that Zenyatta needs some changes. So what kind of changes? What could we do to fix his current problem? Well, he's got a few major issues. His survivability and his mobility being the 2 biggest ones, and then maybe just his functionality. We'll go back to that in a second. Let's start off with his health. So one of the first fixes that we could do is increase his health. He's got the smallest health pool of all of the supports. So either, give him more health, give him more shields, or maybe even replace his alt fire. You're seeing a lot of people talking about replacing his alternate fire where he charges up those orbs because it's not used too very often. So maybe you could replace it with a temporary shield, similar to what Zarya has. His next major problem is his mobility. So on top of having the smallest health pool, he also has no mobility, while the game's other healers, Lucio and Mercy, have 50 more health and great mobility. We could increase his base speed, we could replace his alternate fire once again, but this time with like a short-term speed boost or a teleport on a cooldown, something to give him better mobility ability so that he's not such an easy target for Widowmaker and Pharah. And then one of the other things we could do is just rebuff his orbs. Now, I know they didn't like how powerful they were as permanent buffs to your flankers or debuffs to the enemies until they died or until you picked a new target. So maybe we could simply increase their duration. 3 seconds is really short. Maybe change it to 10 or 15 or something so that you can still track people and still help one of your flankers get behind enemy lines, and then they can come back for you to reapply it or something. And then finally, I want to mention this idea of a new mechanic for him. I've seen this floating around in a lot of discussion about Zenyatta. Something called like the balance mechanic. If you have an Orb of Discord and an Orb of Harmony out at the same time, Zenyatta gets a buff. He either gets a buff to his health, a buff to his speed, a buff to his damage, any combination or any one of those, basically. That's a cool idea. And then one last strange thing about Zenyatta that I'd like to mention that's always brought up as well is how his ultimate kind of counters the rest of his hero design. So Zenyatta is a character that you kind of want to play on the back lines because he's so squishy. You want to be far away from the enemy and you want to be picking them off. And he is great at dealing damage. He can really like dish out some crazy amounts of damage. There's no question about that. But his ultimate then requires you to be in the middle of your team, which also has you in line of sight of your enemies. And with only 150 HP, being in the line of sight of your enemies is a good way to die quickly. I mean, think about other weak characters in this game that can deal a lot of damage. What is their style? Like the Widowmaker and the Hanzo. They want to peek out and shoot and then go back into hiding or just make it difficult for you to hit them. Again, because of the way his ultimate works, because of how his Orbs of Discord and Harmony work right now, that's not really an option. You need to be in the fray of things. The bottom line is that something needs to change. Zenyatta in his current iteration is simply not working. I see him barely played in my own matches, and he's like never being played in competitive matches. Something with his current kit needs to be different from how it is at the moment, and whatever Blizzard decides to do, I hope they do it relatively soon. And I also want to address the fact that no matter what happens, there of course is always going to be some hero that is the least played hero. No matter what, someone's going to be at the bottom of the barrel, but at least to have everyone be viable, I mean, that's the ideal scenario. Is that plausible in a game like this? Is it possible that every hero has an equal chance of being played on a competitive level or being considered viable? Maybe it's not. I've gone through enough games, I'm sure many of you have gone through various games as well, that have these different characters with different abilities and these rock, paper, scissors style of games. There's always a top dog and there's always someone at the bottom. So maybe this sort of perfection, if you will, when it comes to balance is not possible, but I also think that that doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss heroes and where they fit at the moment in the metagame and maybe what we could change with them to make them better. I mean, also, if anything, these nerfs and buffs keep the game fresh as the meta shifts around them. All right, guys, that is going to do it for me here today, talking about Zenyatta being one of the worst heroes at the moment and how we could possibly change that. I want to know what you guys think about this topic in the comments section below. Love to hear your thoughts and opinions. As always, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you have a fantastic afternoon, and until next time, I'll see you later.